Welcome to Ross Fly Box. Today we're going to tie a nymph for the blue-winged olive. This is the version that I've been fishing predominantly over the past probably 3 or 4 years. It's a variation of a number of nymphs. It's a very generic nymph in pattern in design, but does extremely well for me locally. And it's pretty much taken over my box when the olives are coming off. So let's go over how I tie it. I tie it on a standard 14 to 16, and down to 18, 2X long nymph hook. And I start off with olive done uni thread, A-dot. I'll bring my thread base back, normal positioning, just above the barb of the hook to the end of the hook shank. Next, I'm going to tie in the tail. For the tail, I use lemon barred wood duck. I take a section, I would say a little bit larger than you would normally use for a tail, but it's because I do that because I'm going to tie it in a little shorter than normal also. Get my tips even. Normally I would tie this material in for the tail shank length. I'm going to tie it in probably 2/3 of the shank length. I want a shorter tail for this pattern. I found that it just seems to do a little bit better. I don't know if it matches the insects on my area, the streams, but a little bit shorter than normal. Probably 1/3 shorter than I would normally tie this pattern. And bring my thread back up. Trim my excess. And while I got my thread in here, I can tie my wire. I use fine gold wire. And tie it on the side of the hook. And bring my thread back to the tie-in point of the tail. And then bring my thread forward and overwrap that a little bit, form just a slight taper. Just makes it a little bit less dubbing that I have to apply. Next, I'm going to tie in ginger hairline dubbing. No flash, just ginger. I like ginger for this pattern. A lot of times folks will, I feel, tie a little bit darker than you need to with this pattern for the abdomen, forgetting what the dubbing changes to once it's wet. Ginger rabbit turns almost to a charcoal when it's wet, and that's the color I'm looking for, not the color of the fly when it's finished. That's more for the guy at the bench. A bit thick right there. I don't want that. I want just a tad bit more. Not a heavy taper. Just enough. And next we're going to bring our wire forward. If I can get a hold of it. Just evenly wrapped forward. Like I said, you have to pay attention to the dubbing. For years, I never did. I know when I first started tying, you look at the patterns and you say, oh boy, that's not the color of the bug. Wonder why that pattern does so well. Well, it's because you got to pay attention to the colors of the material when wet. It's usually something everybody picks up on fairly fast. Next, I'm going to tie in done turkey flap fibers. I'm going to take a sizable portion, probably a good 1/8 inch section. I'm going to tie this in the butt section. I want the heavier section. I don't crowd the eye when I tie this in, but I do use it to build up the thorax a little bit. Just don't crowd the eye too much. And bind that back in so that it doesn't pull forward when you bring it over the thorax. Next, I'm going to tie in some legs, and I tie these legs in fairly heavy. I want them to be prominent. These are fine fibers, but I'm going to tie more of the wood duck. I do this a little bit different than you may see elsewhere. It just makes it easy for me. I'm going to tie these legs in. I'm going to measure them to be about shank length. Then I'm going to bring them forward. I'm going to pinch wrap right in the beginning of the thorax. I'm going to bring my thread up to behind the eye a little bit. And I'm going to tie them down right there and get them in position. Now that's the length that I want my legs. When I bring them back, I'm going to be about half the shank length. Maybe a little bit less. But I've found that that's the easiest way for me to measure the length I want. And then we're going to tie in a thorax, the same material. Ginger hairline, rabbit, no sparkle. Notice I didn't weight this fly. If I put any weight on this fly at all, it's with a tandem rig or split shot. I don't like this fly to be weighted. I don't care for the action in the water. Some nymphs I prefer them to dive straight down. This pattern I like to drift. And not a huge thorax. And then here you're going to split your legs up. I started to trap a couple fibers there. Don't want to do that. Don't get impatient. Just take your time. Start working them. This is the part that gives me a few fits just because of my dexterity or lack of. Now pull them back out of the way. Once I get them going the way I want. I'm not worried about how they're splayed. I just want them fairly even in count. And they're going to get pushed back a little bit more when you bring your wing case forward. And like I said, then you're going to bring your wing case forward. You're going to flatten those fibers out because you don't want it to be a real narrow wing case. You want it to actually have some substance. And what you'll find is your legs will naturally come back in sort of a delta shape on either side. Lock that wing case in place. One leg up in there. And then build your head. In this pattern, I generally don't put any head cement because I'm going to come up and secure it a little bit with I got one rabbit fiber I can afford to get out of there. But I'm going to come up and hit that with a little bug bond. I like to coat the wing case on this. I feel it gives a little bit of an emerging sense to this pattern. Gives a sense of a bit of trapped air. And the dun mimics possibly the emerging wing. But I don't put a bead head on this pattern, so I like the little bit of translucency and shine it gives. It mimics a little bit of a split wing case possibly, and it gives that air bubble effect in the water. This pattern does very well drift just underneath the surface. I will grease my tippet quite often to about the last foot. When I know I'm going to go to these, I'll grease my tippet real heavy for about up until the last foot, and then I'll let this pattern get wet and emerge and submerge below the surface in the drift, and it does very well for me. And there you go. Blue-winged olive nymph. It's a very effective pattern for me in many waters that I fish here in central Pennsylvania. I hope it adds to your box as well. Good luck. See you in the water.